Hey, Harpslingers, welcome to the Harpslinger Podcast, where each and every week we hang out with the greatest harmonica players in the music business. If you're watching this on the Hohner Music Facebook page, you know what to do. I've said it a million times. At the bottom of the chat, there's a share button. Share that to your personal profile on Facebook. Share it with your friends. Help us spread the word about the Harpslinger Podcast, these great harmonica players and artists that we're interviewing every week, and, of course, Hohner Harmonicas. If you're watching this on the Harpslinger YouTube channel, same thing. Hit the subscribe button, ding the bell. That way I can keep you up to date on all the new content that's coming up. As you know, we've had just a ton of great artists on the show and a lot more on the way. And we have an icon, a Nashville icon on the show today, ladies and gentlemen. So he's a friend of mine, and I'm super excited for him to be here. He had his first recording contract in New York City in his teens, signed his first publishing deal in Nashville at 21, wrote a massive hit for Glen Campbell at 25, was on stage with Tim Hardin at Woodstock at 26, and played the Johnny Cash Show at 29. Kris Kristofferson said, "Kris Gantry is the most consistent, dedicated, creative artist that I have ever known in my life." And here he is on the Harpslinger Podcast today, everybody, Mr. Kris Gantry. How you feeling today, Kris?
Doing good, man. At 79 years old, I'm on the gravy train, baby.
Yes, you are. And we're talking to you. You're down in Texas at the moment, in Galveston, right?
I'm in Galveston, Texas, feeling out the music scene here because Nashville has changed a lot and it's a little convoluted. So I figured I'd come down to Texas and see if I could ingrain myself with some of these genuine, Texas icons down here.
Right on, right on. Well, you got your start early as a songwriter. I mean, you're from Brooklyn, New York. Is that right?
I'm from originally Queens, New York.
Okay, Queens.
And I went to military school on Long Island, and I started singing with a friend of mine, and we imitated the Everly Brothers, and started writing little goofy teenage songs at 12 and 13, and got a record deal.
Amazing. That's amazing. How did that all come about? I mean, how did you even at that age? You're like,
well, we did the cool thing was when we got a pass to go home, we'd go into New York City, my friend and we go to the Brill Building.
Okay.
And the Brill Building, of course, is where all the New York songwriters hung out, just like they hung out on Music Row in Nashville.
Yeah.
And in that building were the greats: Quincy Jones, Paul Simon was in there with Garfunkel under the name of Tom and Jerry, and Jerry Garfin and Carole King were in there as teenagers writing songs. It was a great place to hang, man.
Wow. And you just walked in and started hanging out.
Yeah, we just go door to door, knock, and see if we get an audition. And we finally met a person by the name of Robert Lissauer, who was a big guy in the business, and he signed us. And then he introduced us to a little hipster cab driver named Sid Prosen, who had a record label called Flippin' Records. Yeah, Flippin' Records. Great. And we got on, and then he got us on ABC Paramount. So we were rocking.
Wow. So at what point did you decide you were going to make this big move to Nashville, Tennessee?
When I was 17 and conflicted over going back to school, and I had a year or so in college that didn't work out too well, and I had been going to I heard a music station upstate New York play the Louvin Brothers and some of these long Bill Anderson recitations back in 1962, 61, and it just blew my mind because my father was a classical piano player, and I wanted something different. And then when I heard the Louvin Brothers singing about going to hell and being chased by the devil and being run out of town and all that, I said, these are the kind of lyrics that I can do. I went to the record stores and saw the same names as on the writing of these songs. Mm-hmm. And it ended up when I came to Nashville that I met all those same people and it ended up going to work for them. So
yeah, I mean, within a year of being here, you had your first publishing deal, right?
With Mary John Wilkin, who wrote Long Black Veil, among others. She was a great songwriter, man.
Wow. What was Nashville? What was the energy like here? What was the scene like?
Well, the energy in Nashville is that the whole country was in the middle of a musical revolution
Mhm.
with the advent of Bob Dylan and all the folk singers that had just kind of been winding down, and the the peace movement of Martin Luther King and the sit-ins
Mhm.
and the Black Panthers, and the whole country was like in it changed, total change period. So it was a great time for me to arrive because there was a certain contingency of people who wanted to take their change to Nashville, like John Hartford and Kris Kristofferson and
Yeah.
Lee Clayton and Tony Joe White. And they wanted to change their thing in Nashville. And I was right in the middle of it, man. It was
That's
great.
that's incredible. So, I think back to the first. I've lived in Nashville 3 times now. I'm probably not the only one, but I remember. Well, I know how it has changed over the years. Each time I've come back, there's a bit of a change. But when I first came, it was it was staking out the songwriters and where they were hanging out and where they were practicing their craft, so I could go witness this and be better. Where were you hanging out in town, or how did you meet these people?
I met them in two places. One was the Tally Ho Tavern,
Yeah.
where was right on the corner of 16th and Grand, and in the afternoon, all the old rhinestone guys, the pure country singers
Yeah.
like Webb Pierce and Farron Young and
Uh-huh.
Tom Paul Glazer and young Waylon Jennings would come over to that beer joint, Johnny C. And they would meet there at 3 o'clock and start drinking, and they'd play horseshoes outside. And usually by 4 or 5 o'clock, they started passing guitars around. And me, I had like two or three songs that I'd written, but I got a chance to sing one and make my presence known in a place like that, and get to know these guys, man. And it was the Rhinestone Gang, man.
Yeah.
They were the guys who brought it on, man, from the early 20s to then. And then with the hippie revolution coming on, they started to get nervous, man, because things were changing too fast for them. And
Uh-huh.
guys like me and Hartford and Eddie Rabbit and Tony Joe White, we were bringing this new element into the business, man. So that's that's the way it happened. And the second place was Wally's Professional Club, which was right across the street, and it was the same thing, just late night.
Okay.
And the late night guys like Johnny Cash would come in off the road, and Bocephus was only 15 years old at that time, and he was hanging out right next door. His mother had a publishing company running all of Hank's stuff, and you'd see Bocephus come home from school and be playing out in the front yard.
Wow.
Not music, but playing like a kid.
Yeah. Right, right. That's incredible.
Yeah, it's
Wow,
crazy.
what a golden time for Nashville.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was. It was awesome, man.
Yeah.
Just can't.
Great time to be here. And you mentioned that college didn't go somewhere, but this became your university, Nashville.
Well, yeah, I hitchhiked into Nashville and went to the Grand Ole Opry. The first guy I see is Porter Wagner, and he's as skinny as a Q-tip with a wall of hair on his head, like Dave Brubeck, and and he's smiling and singing a song in this great suit, and I'm saying, well, here it is, man. That's what I want to be right there. I want to be
Right.
that guy. I
Yeah.
didn't know who he was, man, but it was just like being in a carnival, man. It was like
Yeah.
carnival time.
Right, right.
Good,
That's
good time.
amazing. And just 5 short laters, you had written a massive song for Glen Campbell, uh, "Dreams of
Well,
the Everyday Housewife."
well, the few years before, I really worked at songwriting. Those years, I hardly slept. I stayed up. I hung out anywhere I could where the songs were being written, picking up this stuff from this guy, this person, this chick, this lady, this old woman, this old man. It didn't matter. I pick up these ideas and things and start to incorporate it into my own style. And then I realized that I went over to the Wally's Professional Club one night, and I saw Johnny Cash playing pool, and I tiptoed in and stood there, and he's playing. And he's skinny and wrecked out from the road, and I said, "Hey, John," I said, "My name is Chris." I said, what does it take to be great at this? What do you got to do this thing right, man? He stopped and looked at me. He said, the first thing you do is don't try to imitate anybody else. He
Mhm.
said, just be exactly who you are. That's the song I want to hear that comes out of you from who you are. That'll be the real deal, he said. And he went back to shooting pool. Well, I thought about it and I said, well, shit, I'm trying to write songs down here for these people. I'm just going to write songs for me. I'm going to write songs about where I came from. So that's what I did. That's when I stepped out and became the writer that I am now, man.
Yeah, that's impressive. That's great advice, actually. I mean, we could all take more of that advice because no one can be you better than you, of course.
Yeah. If you're gonna write songs, write songs who Jamie is,
That's
man.
right. That's right.
We want to know who you are, dude.
Yeah, exactly. So, that's amazing that when you started doing that and writing these songs for yourself, all of a sudden the cuts started coming.
Yeah,
Johnny Cash, we mentioned Glen Campbell, Reba McEntire, Katie Lang, Robert Goulet, Wayne Newton. I mean, these are
yeah,
some
they were
voices.
heavy hitters back then.
Heavy.
But back then there was money falling out of trees in Nashville. The suits hadn't come to town and bought up all the mom and pop publishing companies. So the publishing companies and the record companies were all run by players and writers, man. The heads of the companies were great players, and so they knew a great song,
Right.
and if they didn't have the right song for somebody, they'd take yours. They wouldn't care. It
Yeah.
was more like hoarding and,
Uh-huh.
oh, we've got to have a piece of the publishing. I'm the artist and I have to have half. It was just different, man. It was
Yeah.
Everybody was accessible. I could walk into Chet Atkins' office, just walk in and say, Chet, I'm trying to learn Deep River Blues. I'm trying to learn a piece on the guitar. And he'd stop what he's doing and say, okay, give me your guitar. This is how you do it right here. Is that, oh, and that was it. Oh, Chet, thanks, man. Walk out. You could approach people. They
That's,
weren't like big stars in their heads. They were just normal country guys just
yeah. Making
having
great music.
making music, having this great time, man.
Such a creative environment. I mean,
I
wow.
mean, Jerry Reed, he used to play on my demos, and I'd look at him playing. I'd say, Jerry, I said, how do you do that, man? How am I going to learn how to play this? He said, son, when you play a guitar, pretend you're killing a snake. I said, whoa, okay. I like that, man. Get down, man. Lean, man. So, little things like that could just like advance your whole perspective like a 1,000 miles, man. It was
Yeah.
great.
That's wonderful to be working in that environment and writing in a publishing for a publishing company. So mixing with those people. I mean, you were on the same publishing label or publishing company as Kristofferson, right?
Well, Kris and I wrote for Mary John. I
Okay.
was playing down in Skull Schulman's Rainbow Room in the
Right.
alley for extra money,
Uh-huh.
and then I got the publishing deal with Mary John, and then I stayed playing at Skulls for a little while, and then she came. She told me one day she was getting demos for a guy who was in the army, and
Mm-hmm.
he was coming to town in about a month, and she wanted to introduce him to me. So she brought him down to Skull Schulman's. I was in between sets, and they came up to stage, and Kris was in an army uniform with a hat on, and he said, "This is Kris Kristofferson. He's going to be coming to work with us when he musters out of the service." I said, "Well, hey, we'll be in the same company together."
Yeah.
And call me when you get here. I'll come help you unload the truck and get you in and all that, which he did.
Wow.
And we were together for 3 years nonstop, every day, trying to find our voice and trying to find our style, how we were going to do this thing.
Yeah.
So nobody knew.
Nobody.
So
Yeah.
nobody knew, man.
That's
Yeah,
sort of the beauty of it, actually.
yeah,
Yeah. It's a
yeah.
beautiful. He.
So he, so
How
Kris becomes this iconic star, and nobody had one. They thought this guy was from hunger, man. They thought he was like a guy that was slowly going to be on his way out, and with a turn of a pen and the turn of a line and a phrase, he changed the whole music business for country music, man.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
mean, he just turned it upside down. So it was a beautiful thing, man.
That is a beautiful thing, and I think the reverence there is like mutual. Of course, you know, I want to reference his famous song "The Pilgrim," where he talks about you. And at the beginning, you know, you've heard this a
Yeah.
gajillion times, but for the listeners, I want to read this. I started writing this song about Chris Gantry. Ended up writing about Dennis Hopper and Johnny Cash, Norman Norbert, Funky Donnie Fritz, Billy Swan, Bobby Newirth, Jerry Jeff Walker, Paul Siebel, Ramblin' Jack Elliott, and on.
Yeah.
And to be mentioned in that phrase is says, you know, just mountains about your friendship and about what he thinks of you. And I think that's very telling.
It was pretty cool. I was, you know, I chose to pull back from the madness of the spotlight. I had a chance to go in that direction because I was on the road with Chris all the time when he was breaking out and becoming really famous.
Yeah.
And we played all over the country together, but I was more reticent to go in that direction because I just did not want to be that person. So I became the guy kind of in the background that always uplifted him and talked about him when I had the opportunity. But I told somebody the other night, I said, had it been in reverse, and I would have had the iconicism that Chris had, and he would have been me in the kind of in the wings there, he would have said the same shit about me
Yeah.
I said about him
Right.
because we had that kind of relationship. We still do, man. Still do.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. I'm a fan of both of you. You've said that there was a freedom in Nashville back then, that songwriters had power, but that purity got upended and it sank to the bottom of the sea of apathy. First of all, I just want to say, I read your Facebook page every day because there's like pearls of wisdom there every day. You're such a prolific writer. You're always writing. I love the way you write and how. Yeah, I love your voice, how you speak, and literally, I love your voice and how you speak. But I think that's poignant information about. We talked about the energy and the scene of Nashville at one point and about it today. I wonder if you could maybe expound on that a little bit.
Well, there were two publishers, Mary John Wilkin and Bob Beckham, who ran Combine Music. They had the perspective that were going to if they were going to pay somebody to develop their art,
Mm-hmm.
like they did for Chris and myself and a few others, that to not try to mold them in something that was dying. They saw that the type of songs were dying, and they realized that there were changes in this country going on.
Right.
So they paid us to be able to experiment and find our voices and take the time to do it. Pay us while we took the time to find out what we were capable of doing. And for some of us, it took a year, 2 years, 3 years, but eventually all those songs that were written under the auspices of publishers fostering us in that way, those songs became standards, man.
Mm-hmm.
The songs that came out of that kind of relationship, writer, you've heard 30, 40, 50 years later, man.
Yeah.
The songs that are hits nowadays in country music, 2 years from now, you never hear them anymore.
Mm-hmm.
There are no such thing as standards anymore. That's just the way it's become. But the songs that we hear on the radio today, except for a small percentage, they make a big burst on the front end, they make the writer a bunch of money, and then nobody ever remembers them again.
Right.
That's not the way I wanted to live my life, let alone write my songs. I want to do things that have a lasting quality, man.
Mm-hmm.
And so did Chris, and so did Billy Swan, and Donnie Fritz, and Dennis Hopper, and all those people that wanted lasting art. And I know you're the same way, man, about what you do with your music and stuff.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So
I have been, over the years, I've been struck by, being a fan of country music for most of my life. It ebbs and tides. It takes, or ebbs and flows. It's got this occasionally it gets really poppy, and then it gets really traditional, and I'm wondering what you think, if it is in fact cyclical, and if at some point do you think that the kind of artistry that you grew up in Nashville will ever return, or is that something that's gone forever?
Well, it's not gone forever because if you watch the cycles, always somebody comes on the scene, like an Elvis,
Mhm.
like a Dylan, like a Kristofferson, somebody who presents presents what's old in a new way
Right.
and shuffles the words so it resonates deeper and wider and broader than it ever did before.
Hmm.
And that starts the whole thing. That starts the ballroom. It takes one person to captivate a nation, a civilization. And we're waiting for that next person to come, whoever
Yeah.
that might be.
Whatever that might be, but they're there.
Yeah, and it's coming. It's coming. It came in the form of Elvis, who was a physical singer
Hmm.
and unleashed sensual physicality. It came in the form of Dylan, who became philosophical and brainwaves and all that great stuff and changed the thought processes of the country. It came with Kristofferson, who changed, he brought the same principles into all of his songs, romanticism, truth,
Hmm.
and a message that has to do with how to live
Hmm.
and how to survive in this world. And he always using himself as the example of the guy who took the fall, man, who's taking the fall.
Hmm.
That's the great thing. Here's a secret, man. And this is what I do in my own thing. Always let somebody else be the hero. Let somebody else be the hero and show yourself in humility and your infallible qualities as a human being, man. Your faults, your all your stuff.
Sure.
But let's always let somebody else be the hero, man.
Wow.
And that's great. That keeps you out of the soup. It makes you less of an egomaniac.
Yeah, I love that perspective. That's great
Yeah.
advice, actually. Thank you. Yeah. Well, this is a harmonica podcast, so occasionally we do talk a little bit about harmonica, but we're not going to only talk about harmonica with you, because then we would miss so much other wonderful stuff. So, but for a moment, let's do talk about harp. At what point? Now you're a rack harmonica player. You're a Hohner endorsee. To my knowledge, you play the Marine Band.
I play the Marine Band, and they have some other little models that they've given me that I try out that, I don't have the ear to be able to tell the depth of the difference between them all. When I get playing, they all say it's like drinking a beer. Once you take 3 sips, they all they all taste alike.
I,
Yeah,
I
you
love it.
can talk about, you know.
When did
I,
you
I
first
go to
start
the
playing? When did you
go
start
ahead.
playing the harp?
When I was first came to Nashville, the first records that I made, I played harmonica on them.
Okay.
Not very well, but I played enough to make it sound like I knew what I was doing,
Right.
which you don't have to do a whole lot of sometimes on the harmonica. Now, a guy like you sounds like he knows what he's really, really doing. Me, I just blow in and out, make a vibrato with my mouth, and just happen to be able to follow along with the chords I'm playing, and it fits. It makes it sound pretty damn good, man.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, we've done shows together, so
Yeah,
I've heard you do your thing on harmonica in person, and that is, you're right. The thing about harmonica is you don't have to be a Howard Levy or Charlie McCoy to be effective. It's such an emotive instrument. I've talked
it
about this
is.
with all of the artists that we've had on the show. It evokes an emotion immediately. It's very much like a voice, and you
Right.
use it in all the right spots.
Yeah, use it in the right spot. I kind of imitate my father was a great accordion player,
Okay.
so he had all those pulls and those pushes. I remember them, so I'm kind of doing those things with
Yeah.
my mouth as in the changing of the chords, and they just kind of go. So, and then if you know how to make a vibrato, which I became real good at, it makes it sound a little more professional.
Yeah, for real. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I wanted to, I've heard a story that when Dylan was in town recording Blonde on Blonde, that he left his harps somewhere, and Kristofferson somehow came to get you and said, "Hey, Bob needs your harps."
Yeah, well, yeah, he knocked on my door. It was about 10 o'clock at night. I was sleeping. He woke me up. He knocked on the door, and he was working as a janitor down at Columbia Studios then.
Uh-huh.
And they sent him out to look for harmonicas, and he knew me. And I had about 4 or 5 of them, and I gave them all to him. And from what I understand, Dylan used them on Blonde, but he never gave the harps back.
They became gifts.
Yeah, he became gifts. So that's okay.
Yeah.
Bob's Bob's a crook. He's all right. I love him.
That's fantastic. Oh,
And my lady friend, she is the biggest Bob Dylan fan in the world. She has every piece of literature, every book, every piece of music ever back written, and she's living with a songwriter.
right.
So she tells me, she says, well, Kris, she says, you write as good as Bob Dylan, but you're number two. And I said, wait a minute. I said, I'm going to drop back down to three. I said, if I can be three, that way I don't have to compete with trying to be number one, which I wouldn't do anyway. And that way I can just relax out here, and you can have your fun with number one, and I'll just be hanging around. And when you when you want to throw a little light on me, you can say, hey man, there's number three over there. I love this dude. so,
Oh,
so that's it.
I love it. I love it. Well, you're sort of you have this great story because you're sort of everywhere, and there's all these little things that went on during the course of your career, and one of them was showing up at Woodstock. You helicoptered in to Woodstock. Was this with Tim Hardin? Because you eventually ended up on stage with Tim Hardin, who wrote "If I Were a Carpenter."
Yeah, he did. Well, I met Tim playing in New York at the bitter end, and he was there with Crosby, Stills, and Nash and Young,
Uh-huh.
and they were playing for him. They did their own set, and then they would back up Tim, and I was in the audience, and I was with Kris actually, but I was so enamored with Tim's vocal style.
Uh-huh.
He had such a beautiful sound and resonance to his voice, and I kind of I was just kind of in awe of that. So I introduced myself, and he invited me up to the room afterward to play music and get high. What you do in those days at
Yeah.
the Chelsea Hotel.
Wow.
And so he told me, he said, "Why don't you come up to Woodstock in a few weeks?" He said, "I'm getting ready to go play this show at Woodstock, and come on up and hang out." So that's what I did. I drove my truck all the way up to Woodstock, and stayed a week with him as he rehearsed with his band.
Okay.
Um, so the day of, we got in a helicopter and flew in over all these people slogging down the roads like it was unreal. It was like endless miles and miles of people, and even you get to the stadium with the field, and it was seas of people. It was unreal. So when he followed Richie Havens, and when he had practiced Bobby Darin's song that he wrote, "Simple Song of Freedom," and I heard it all week. It was in my head. So when they started playing it, I was in the back by standing with Hugh Romney, one of the hog farmers, and I said, I'm going up there. So I went up on stage and got right up in the back with him and started singing "Simple Song of Freedom." So I was just a kid, man. I was on stage.
You were feeling the spirit of Woodstock.
Really? Yeah, it was. It was great. And that was kind of the end. That was 1969 in September. And that year I was so burned out from the whole Nashville experience of
Mhm.
staying up 1,000 years and writing 1,000 songs and
Right.
going through the whole Kris thing and
Uh-huh.
Combine and all these people that I flew down to, I got my truck and went to Key West, which was a little nothing town then.
Yeah.
It's quiet,
Right.
and rented an apartment and just stayed there
Stayed there.
for a while.
Is that where you
Yeah.
met Shel Silverstein?
Well, yeah, fortunately and unfortunately, I drove to get out of town and get away from everybody. I pull in this place called Louis' Backyard after driving for like 2 maniacal days, 900 miles in a truck. And I slump up to this dock that's overlooking the ocean, and it's warm and beautiful. And I order some booze, and I order a lobster dinner, and I'm sitting there just like this, beat. And all of a sudden, I hear a voice go, "Well, yeah, I think I like the lobster, and don't make it too done, and bring some pasta to go with that, maybe some vegetables." And shell talk like that. And I say, "Whoa!" I spin around like this, and he's sitting right behind me. And he looks at me, and we look at each other and go, like this, "What are you doing here?" So we get together, we have our meal, and then what we did was go to our car. I got my guitar out, he got his flute out, and that night we hopped around the whole island, playing the flute and playing guitar and singing crazy songs. We just hopped around like about 3 miles around the island,
Yeah, yeah.
covered the whole thing. And then that was it. Me and Shell, we stayed there for years.
How long were you there?
Well, I rented an apartment. He rented a place. And then I came back to Nashville for about 6 months and then went back, and I stayed there for like 6 years.
Okay. Wow.
But if you have because I was surrounded by great poets and great novelists. All the great novelists were there. Tom McGuane and Jim Harrison
Mhm.
and all these people, man. And they were writing big books and great poetry. So I sucked up all that juice, and that's how I got into my own writing of poetry and short stories and what you read on Facebook. My language styles I culled and learned and shit like
Uh-huh.
that. Man, it's cool. And of course, I learned from Shell being my running buddy. He became my running buddy. It was like, okay, everything he ever did, I sucked it in, man,
Yeah.
and became hip to the big long poems and the big stories. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah, that's
I was
incredible.
one of the-
And yeah, and you're such a great poet, and you've even written plays. I know you won a Tennessee Williams Award for some short plays that you made. I mean, what an incredible thing.
well, yeah, well, the thing is that I stopped Shell on the street one day on Duval Street. I said, "Shell, how do you write these short plays? How do you write them, man?" I said, "You got these plays going on." I said, "I'd like to learn how you do that." He looks at me and says, "Kris, show up at the house tomorrow with a pad and a pen. You come there at 10 o'clock and you do exactly what I tell you to do." So I got excited. So I go over to his house, and he says, "Okay, sit down." So he says, "In about 5 minutes, I'm going to tell you to go. At the top of your page, you're going to write W for woman, and then right under it, M for man. You're going to write a short play and do a dialogue between those two." And he says, "The first thing that comes into your mind, no matter what it is, that's the title of the play." I said, "Okay." So he looks at it and says, "Go, bang." So first thing that came into my mind, I wrote down, and he said, "And don't ever take your hand off the page. If you stop writing," he said, "whatever comes into your mind, keep it going, but don't stop." He says, "That's the killer right there, the stuff, because then you start thinking." He
Yeah.
says, "You don't want to think, you just want to write." And that's how I learned automatic writing, man, right then. I just let it just flow, and I just sat and looked out the window on my hand kind of thing.
Wow.
And 13 pages later, I had a play. He said, "Stop." I had 13, 14 pages. I said, "Holy shit." I said, "That was wild." I said, "You want to read the play?" He says, "No, I don't want to read it." He says, "I got to go meet a girl down at the pier house." So the next day, I go to the library and follow the same procedure. And every day after that, until I wrote about 23 plays. And then I took the best 5 that I liked and entered them in the Tennessee playwriting contest, and I won right away.
Oh man, that's fantastic. You were born
That's how
to
that
do it.
felt.
What's that?
That's how that felt, man. It's always great to have a great mentor
Uh-huh.
in your life.
Yeah.
because it's invaluable, man. It's fucking invaluable.
Right, right. Speaking of mentors, I don't know if he was a mentor to you, but I know that he was someone very important in your journey. Johnny Cash. You ended up. Yes. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, no, no. No, Johnny was huge, man.
Yeah.
Huge for the fact of he was like and I idolized him as a 13-year-old in military school, playing "I Walk the Line" and doing that deep voice thing,
Uh-huh.
man, and that guitar sound, and it was like it just I could never stop listening to that song.
Right.
So when I got to Nashville, after I started having some success, and I did talk to John in the pool room that day.
Mhm.
Uh, I bought a farm. Every dummy buys a farm in Nashville. You know, you think you got to be a big farm. Has to be a landowner. Got to have him. Got to walk around him. It's all bullshit. So I was a stupid kid, and I bought this farm. And of course, the first thing I did, because I was a dummy, was grow a lot of marijuana.
Yeah. No.
So I got busted.
Right.
The feds found out about it and swarmed the place, and I got busted. So it came out in the newspaper, and John read it, and he called me up, and he said, "Hey, Kris, why don't you move out to the house here, out to the lake house, until all this heat dies down? You can just stay out of the fray for a while till we get this thing managed right."
Hmm.
Because back then, if you were involved with marijuana, like in 1965 or something like that, you were like a murderer
Right.
in Tennessee. It
Yeah.
was like being a, you know,
Yeah.
real bad guy. So uh, anyway, I moved out to John's house, and it was weird for me because all of a sudden I'm thinking back to being 13
Mhm.
in military school on Long Island, and now all of a sudden here I am living in the house of the king, and he's treating me like an equal. I'd had Dreams of the Everyday Housewife come out. It was a huge hit and everything. And he's treating me as an equal at 24, 20 something years old. And I felt strange about that, man. I didn't realize that I was maybe as good as I was back then. I didn't think of myself that way.
Right.
But I knew I was on top of my songwriting game. I was on top of it then.
Yeah.
So uh, I stayed at his house, and we rode around in his Jeep and had deep talks,
Mhm.
and drove out to what became the cabin, the Cash Cabin.
Mhm.
Before it was the Cash Cabin, it was his place where he hung out and did his own wacky shit and everything
Yeah.
like that. And we had great talks and got to know each other. And then after that, I signed with his publishing company and went to work for him.
Right.
So I saw him all the time. You know, I became one of Johnny was my buddy.
Yeah. That's fantastic. And you recorded a record at the House of Cash, right? And that's the
Yeah,
title
yeah,
of the record.
yeah. He told me, he said, "Kris, I got this studio just sitting here." He says, "Why don't you go in and make a record while you and record these songs you're writing for us?"
Mhm.
I said, "You sure you want me to do that?" I said, "Yeah." So I got my friends together, and I went down to Mexico to write the album, and I got involved in peyote ceremonies and wrote a lot of the songs in these peyote ceremonies, and, and came back and got my producer, who was also kind of a wig head,
Right.
and we recorded this album. And John and June, about a week or two after it was recorded, they went in to listen to it one night. And then John sees me the next day, and he pulls me aside and he says, "Kris," he says, "June and I went in and listened to the album last night, and I got to tell you something." He said, "Kris," he said, "I don't even think the drug people are going to understand this record." And so when he said that, I felt good about that, because I realized I had transcended my own time.
Hmm.
I transcended that. And I wasn't that I was taking drugs then, even though I was doing peyote in Mexico. And so I kind of liked it. So right after that, he went out of business and sold the company and moved to Jamaica.
Okay.
and the album got lost somewhere. And me, I always forget about what's behind me, and I was already plunging into new stuff, so I didn't care much anymore. So it got lost for 40 years, 45 years actually, got lost. And then one day, John Carter Cash calls me up, his son, who's a big guy now. I
Yeah.
knew him when he was like his size.
Yeah.
And he's a big dude, and he calls me and he says, Kris, I'm going through an old vault that my father had out in Goodlettsville somewhere, and we found these tapes, and your name's on these boxes. And I guess they're yours. And I said, send them to me, man. And it was the record
Wow.
in the old 16-inch
Uh-huh.
reels and stuff like that. So I called Peter Cooper at the Country Music Hall of Fame, and he calls his friend Jerry DeSica in Austin, Texas, sends him the stuff, and Jerry pitches it to Drag City Records in Chicago, and they said, we love this. So they put it out, man.
That's
They put it.
impressive. That's impressive.
Yeah, so it's a good story, because if you're an artist, don't ever lose sight that what you did gets lost. Because if you're consistent and you keep moving ahead and don't quit,
Right.
that stuff will get found someday, and it'll be relevant at another point in time for something.
Yes.
So don't ever give up hope on your lost work.
Right. Right. That's actually
That's it.
that's not actually good. That's good to hear from your perspective, because I always wonder, I'm always looking toward the next thing too. And then wondering if, well, what if I've done the things that I've done in the past may never be heard or whatever, but
Right.
there's always hope for that. Right.
Yeah, you just keep moving along, and
Yeah.
the angel makes it all happen.
Right.
Anybody who's an artist like yourself, man, you've got guidance, you've got spiritual entities that are looking out for you and moving you to place, like on a checkerboard.
Mhm.
One move might not seem like the right place, but the next move might say, well, that's a little better than the last one. Then they move you to, oh, holy shit, I've just jumped 5 spaces. What the heck is this?
Yeah.
And that's the way your life works, man,
Uh-huh.
as an artist.
Yeah.
Till you say, check, king me, daddy.
King me, daddy.
Yeah, man.
Well, you had a king me moment again with Johnny Cash being on singing Allegheny, the great song Allegheny on the Johnny Cash show, which is, by the way, available on YouTube. People can go watch that performance. What a moment! I mean, I just watched it this morning for like the 100th time, just to.
I look like a wild animal standing there. I was like somebody that let out of a cage, and I was worried about all those guitar licks, if I was going to be able to remember them, because I was getting juiced up and nervous about doing this, man.
Mhm.
And I had to do it by myself, and I didn't have a band or nothing, but playing those guitars.
That was a great guitar part. You were cooking. You were killing the snake on that one, as you say.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's that Jerry Reed thing, man. Play like you're killing a snake, man.
Yeah, it's wild advice, but I can see you translated it. Yeah, and it works. It works for you. You know.
Yeah, work. But I look crazy. I look like a wild animal on that show.
Well, at times Johnny looked like a wild animal on that show as well, right? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was the time. It was the time.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. So, I, I want to move on to some of your discography. That Introspection was your first record in 1968. Uh,
Oh, boy.
Motor Mouth in 1970. Uh,
Yeah.
you recorded House of Cash session in 73 and 74, but as you say, it wasn't released until around the late, like maybe 2017 or something like that. Uh, Gantry Rides Again fell in there at 2015. And your most recent, Nashlantis 2019. I'm taken by the name of that record, and I wonder if you'd tell us about
Well,
that record.
Nashlantis was produced by Jerry DeSica, who did that for Drag City Records. And the way I look at Nashville is that at one particular point in time, there was a great artistic boom, and it was happening when I was there, amongst those people who wrote those songs that became standards, like Rainy Night in Georgia, and I Can Help, and Me and Bobby McGee, and For the Good Times, Dreams of the Everyday Housewife. Those type of songs that
Right.
took hold. And since that time, that what might have been Atlantis sunk to the bottom of the sea of apathy, man. Those songs and that fervent, that great ambition to change things died out when the mom and pop publishing companies got bought up by corporations and the suits out of California, who came in and didn't know how to run publishing companies and wanted instant hits. That's all they wanted. They wanted to get their money back, and a lot of them ended up using those companies as write-offs for bigger corporations. That's just the way it ended up. So I think that old artistic flair sunk to the bottom of the sea of Nashville apathy, and it's bubbling around down there. And those artists, that old juice is still down there trying to get up. Everybody in my era pretty much has passed away. Kris is still alive, but he's retired.
Yeah.
Billy Swan is out there. I don't know if he plays much. Donnie Fritz passed. Jerry Jeff Walker passed. John Prine passed. That great stuff is gone. And I'm this old guy. I'm still standing, and I've just played a killer show. Me and my harmonica and guitar in Galveston 3 nights ago, outdoors with the wind blowing off the ocean, and holding them there for 2 hours. And they loved it. They needed it, man, here, because the pandemic shut down not only the friends and the people, but it shut down all the entertainment and the music. And I was the first guy to bring it back after the pandemic. And I brought a great lady up, Claire Valine. She sang on my show. She got to do 2, 3, 4 songs on the show. And she's an amazing singer that I recorded a record on her this year.
Okay. Right.
So it was a blowout for me, and now I'm starting to make my way into Austin and meet some of the songwriters, and the club owners have been contacting me. They know I'm alive, still doing it. So I'm going to go out and start honking again pretty soon, man.
I love it, man. I was going to ask you what's next for Kris Gantry, but you've just said it, and you're already doing it. You're back on stage where you belong, right?
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
So, hey, what can I say? I'll be one of those guys that do it right to the end. I mean,
I hope
there's
so.
no escape route for me.
Right
so
on.
what else? So let me say one thing about the first Monument record.
Yes, please.
Introspection. That to me was really a great album, because I had about three or four songs got national attention off that record, but it was the day and time when you could walk into a studio with the charts written up by an arranger and have the full orchestra section there, the full rhythm section, the A team of that day.
Yeah.
And you walk in, and I'm a kid, young, I'm like a young kid, and my guitar is the lead instrument.
That's so great.
And sing those songs and have this orchestra play them and do them to each one about 2 or 3 times and do the whole record in a day and have it come out freaking great, man.
Yeah.
And then mixed, and the arranger was Cam Mullins, who was to me the greatest arranger in that town. And there were some other great ones like Bill Justice, who wrote Raunchy, and Bill Purcell, who just passed away. Great arrangers, but nobody was like Cam Mullins, man. Cam had musicality all over it, and my songs were big musical pieces back then, and they lent themselves to his stuff, man.
Yeah.
He just went shit. It was great. It was great.
Fantastic. Where can people get those records? Where can people at least listen to those records?
You can find them Introspection on Spotify.
Okay.
And then Motormouth, I just totally flipped the coin and did my Highway 61 album.
Yeah.
Just burn it down and and let your freak flag wave high, man. It
Uh-huh.
was cool. It
Right
was
on.
cool.
Right on. And those are all available through your website too, is that right?
Website and Spotify.
Website and Spotify. People can also
Mhm.
find your short stories there. I was on your website a lot this week getting ready for this interview. Of course, I know you, but I still wanted to find out more about you. So, I really was sort of possessed by your
Poems,
yes, man,
poetry.
your poetry, and I think, man, artists are artists. Artists, real artists, in my opinion, can do anything. If you wanted to be a painter, I believe you could be a great painter. And you could have been a great actor. You have this delivery with these pieces. They come to life, and it's really impressive. I mean, I've done some acting in my life, and wish I could I
Well,
wish I could
you
do
know
what
who
you did in those videos.
you know who inspired me to deliver the way that delivery is? Watching Burt Lancaster play Elmer Gantry in that movie Elmer Gantry, Sinclair Lewis, man.
Okay.
You know, when I watched Burt Lancaster do those deliveries as a young guy
Uh-huh.
back in the '50s, how he did that. He won the Academy Award for that role, by the way. I said, "Wow!" I said, "That's the way you take the stage, right there. You just you fill the room up with every inch of yourself.
Yeah.
You put every inch of yourself in the space of the room, so nothing else exists in there, and then you blast into that space, which is what he did, and I've never forgotten that, and that got into me as far as my own musical delivery and my own verbal delivery on my poetry.
Right. Well,
Burt Lancaster.
Burt Lancaster. I love it. Well, folks, if you must go to Chris Gantry. Oh, before I say that, I want to talk a little bit about what you call yourself an outlaw. Some people refer to yourself as an outlaw. I think that name is sometimes misinterpreted. Uh, you know,
Yeah,
tell me what you mean by a musical outlaw. I mean, I think I know
it,
what you mean, but
it means absolutely nothing, to be honest with you. In my songs, I have a song called Alleys and Kings, where we talk about that and saying, it's really a disingenuous word, because all people were doing back in the '60s who were changing music were being themselves and writing from their own point of view.
mhm.
And they say, well, you're deviating from the musical style that's been here for all these years. That's like being an outlaw. Well, being an outlaw is just being yourself, man, being true to yourself, writing honest and being happy about it, and taking it to the world. That's all it means. And I mean, you can wear a weird hat and grow a big thick beard and grow it down to your waist and comb your hair, but it's all about what you're talking about in your lyrics. It's like, you could look like Pee Wee Herman, and if you really sang with honesty and love and genuine stuff, you could call him an outlaw and look like Pee Wee, man. It don't matter. You don't have to look this part,
Yeah.
although it helps. It's
Yeah.
look at you. I've people have called you the hippie Jesus, man. That you come on stage, you look like the Lord walking out there, man. It's like they do, man.
I
All
love
the
it.
women and stuff like that, they call you there's Jesus. You look like Jesus, that boy. That boy look like Jesus. And you know that. You've heard that
Yeah, I've
thousand
heard that
times.
a few times.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And, and with
No,
my
but
band, we're trying to follow suit with exactly what you've been preaching today. Is about writing about the real stuff, writing about love, writing from our perspective.
yeah,
Um,
man.
and you've been a great beacon of light for this community in those sorts of ways for many years. Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah.
Well, all I can say is, Jamie, look, if you were to shave your head and cut your beard off and wear a shirt that made your arms look 10 times thinner than they might be, with big things, that thing just come out like, and button up the top, but you played the harmonica the way you do, nobody would even think 1 second about the way you look. They'd be so enthralled with listening to how you played, man. that it really don't matter how you freaking look.
Right.
So me, I have no choice. I'm losing. When I want a haircut, I drive fast and stick my head out the window.
Oh man, you're a handsome devil, and that's for sure. Yeah, you know that. You know that. Wow.
So,
Well, thank you so much for spending this hour with me today, Kris.
thanks, man. It's an honor, and I love you as a friend.
Back at
But
you. Thank you for that.
I respect you as an artist too, man. I want you to know that.
You made my life. Thank you so much. I appreciate that for real. So, folks, make sure you go check out Kris Gantry. You can do that at chrisgantry.outlaw.com. And you also want to go to Kris's Facebook page because there is every day you're getting fresh new content, as I say at the beginning of this podcast. But it's this wonderful prose by one of the great writers in American history, I would say. So an icon, Kris Gantry, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Absolutely. I love you back, man.
Bye, folks.
Peace and love to you, Kris. We'll see you, brother. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right.